Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about The Ultimates issue 13 by Dennis Camp, Juan Frigeri and Federico Blee. Ultimates 3.0 gets well underway this issue as Iron Lad begins using the Immortus engine in some really interesting ways. His work is interrupted by Wasp, who comes to debrief about her mission in Buenos Aires. She finds Tony is rather absent-minded though, not having eaten in a long while and just very out of it, all thanks to the Immortus engine and its extended use. Wasp plans on spending the night in the Triskelion since Hank is having his night terrors again and she wants a good night's sleep. However, if you've been keeping up with the book, you know that she is actually a double agent working for Nick Fury and Hand, and she is definitely going to be doing some spying and sabotage, especially since Tony is hard at work setting up the team's next steps to stop the Maker, who's very close to coming back. Tony barely acknowledges her though, since he's actually writing a letter to his father in his head, telling Howard that it's taking him dying to realize how fixing the world is easier said than done. He's going to keep trying since he's figured out why they failed, because they were clinging to the lives they never had, trying desperately to replicate that. Camp has really found gold here. He's having these characters evolve, being the quote-unquote ultimate versions of Iron Man or Captain America or Ant-Man or any of these other characters. He's going to turn them into something else and something quote-unquote original. They won't be adhering to the lives they never lived or trying to fit into the lives their 616 counterparts had. They're going to be doing something different. This is a great evolution for Tony as well, since he's a futurist and he's actually following through on that and looking at the future, or obviously quite literally as well, for inspiration. This leads Tony and America Chavez to travel the world and ask groups of people who the Ultimates are. The answer being that they are the Ultimates themselves. All of the people are. I love the idea of that instead of the Ultimates being a team, they are a movement in this universe. They are a community, and in this world it makes sense since the heroes weren't the only ones affected by the Maker. Everyday people had their lives completely upended or changed or erased by the Maker and his tinkering of the timeline, so they have about as much skin in the game as the powered people do. It also brings about something I really enjoy in comics, which is when the common man stands up for themselves, their loved ones, and those around them. And it also adheres to the very much Marvel superhero, where they're usually just like a normal guy who gets given like a great responsibility or some great power, and he rises up to help the oppressed. As the people around the world are rallied by the Ultimates, the team attack a Red Skull stronghold, freeing some children the militia were trafficking before killing their way through the Nazi scum. Steve is intent on finding the Grand Skull, who we learnt not too long ago was actually Bucky Barnes in this universe, and he demands that the surrendering men tell him where the Grand Skull is, since their time as Red Skulls is over and it's either imprisonment or rehabilitation. This is as close to the older Ultimate Captain America that this new Cap has gotten, and it's really fun good. He's not pulling any of his punches, but as Tony knows, these men joined up for something to believe in, and Steve needs to give them and others something else to believe in, basically burn away the rot that is the skulls and replace it with a force for good. As Cap stomps out the Nazis, the Ultimates launch an app that connects its users to their own version of the internet called the Ultimates Network, which Tony has created and set up as a way to spread news that the mainstream media is shying away from, effectively telling the truth for the first time in this world's history. The app and the new internet spread like wildfire, with people learning the media is outright lying to them or not reporting on what should be. On top of providing news though, the network also provides handy tutorials for its users, like Iron Lad demonstrating how to make Molotov cocktails, something I never actually thought I would actually see in a million years, but is just fucking awesome. Things begin coming to a head as one day Jim Hammond comes to Tony, telling him he's ready for his part in this mission, wanting to move on with their own little plan. Tony is worried for Jim, but Hammond knows that he needs to have this happen, and he doesn't want to say goodbye to the team, only wanting Tony to tell them the truth. He's gone to go and set a fire. Their conversation is listened to by Wasp, who, like I said before, is spying on Tony, and she's figuring out like what this team is up to. Now we don't see what happens with Jim here, since we see it kind of from how Wasp is seeing it, and he's seemingly zapped away from the Triskelion, like teleported somewhere. If I had to guess, Tony has sent him on an important mission to play, like I guess maybe he's time traveled or something, like Tony has used the Immortus engine to send him somewhere maybe in the past, and I have to imagine this will be some sort of third act reveal once the Maker comes back, like he's like the unaccounted for variable in the Maker's plan, and he's the one that ends up kind of coming in when the team needs needs it the most. After helping Jim, Tony goes to help She-Hulk, who's returned to her island nation where Banner's immortal weapons have been killing the megafauna, and AIM have set up shop and are imprisoning the mutated people of the island, constructing giant gamma weapons to keep them in line. Tony and She-Hulk aren't there to attack, having learned from their previous bouts with Banner, so now they'll just observe, plan, and prepare before making a move. To help, Tony turns to God, quite literally, talking with the clouds which tell him that he is on his own now and forever. Now I'm not sure if this is meant to be Thor or not. It's not really made clear who it is. This person does mention Midgard, and the clouds are made of thunder and lightning, so it would make you assume that it is Thor, but it's a strange way to present Thor, especially since he's been on this team and the way he's just kind of disregarding what is happening on Earth like it was nothing felt, unlike the Thor we've seen in this book until now, especially because we know the Maker directly influenced what happened on Asgard because he was the one who installed Loki as his puppet dictator on Asgard, so I would imagine he would still like to get even with the Maker. It's just a very strange place and strange way to show Thor in this book, especially because he comes off as very antagonistic and almost like a villain to Tony. Meanwhile, back at Seagate Prison, Luke Cage continues to inspire prison uprisings all across the country, so much so that many of them have become sovereign states, defending themselves from the Maker's soldiers, somehow holding back the tide. Tony arrives at Seagate, finding Luke's rehabilitation and education programs are actually working. This book, and most of Camp's work actually, has always been forward-thinking when it comes to discussing real-world politics and weaving them into the comic story, not just kind of laying it over the top of it like a lot of writers do. And here is no different, as he's expanding on things we saw in that Luke Cage-centric issue from a few months back, which is discussing things like prison reform, how rehabilitation can and will work if given the proper tools and environments for it to flourish, and it's just thoroughly interesting to see this stuff appear in a mainline comic book that's going to reach a very wide audience, since I think it is something that people should maybe be talking about as prison rehabilitation. Tony finds Luke beginning his inaugural class of the Ultimate Avengers program, a special class which looks to teach individuals how to use many of the catalysts Tony has access to, training them to use it and how to become a hero. Now this is a genius idea. It's so instead of just sending out these catalysts to people who had those powers and costumes in the 616 universe, like what Tony did before when he sent it out to people like Spider-Man, and then you got people like Shocker and like Hawkeye and everything who didn't get it, and other people got it because they intervened. Instead of doing that, he's having people trained specifically to use ones he has in his stockpile, basically not giving the nuke to the toddler anymore. He's training the toddler to use the nuke first. The idea as well is also that normal people get a chance to be the big hero, and as I said before, that kind of fits with the whole Marvel superhero thing where usually they all just begin as just like a normal guy given a chance to be abnormal. They're like Spider-Man's like the prime example where he's just like a normal kid who then through a series of events is given the powers of a spider and becomes Spider-Man and rises up to that challenge and meets it head on and takes on that responsibility and power. And here Camp captures that so well by doing that with these people, giving these people who would never have a chance any other time to be both rehabilitated in prison and then giving them a great power and a great responsibility to help defend the Earth. Tony and Luke aren't the only ones helping them, as each of the Ultimates has a role to play in shaping these new heroes, helping them with combat strategy, science, civics, and politics. Tony's role is an interesting one as well, since he knows that they don't have a lot of time, so he ends up working on erecting a giant dome around Seagate Prison, effectively emulating Maker City so that time passes much faster inside the prison than it does outside the prison walls, so they can train all of these people in a fraction of the time. This is all thanks to Tony using the Immortus engine, which he has said he wanted to use more of, and the big reveal is he's using it quite a fair bit actually, as all of the moments we've seen here, from him helping She-Hulk, stopping the Red Skulls, helping Luke in prison, these are all happening at the exact same time. But Tony is in all of these places, so how could that be? Well, Tony returns to the Triskelion and his trick is revealed as he has used the Immortus engine to split himself into several time-displaced versions of himself. So I think this is the moment we see Kang being born, if I'm being honest. I think Tony is splitting himself in time and he's really pushing himself and showing too that he's becoming a little detached from reality, as evidenced by at the beginning of the book when Wasp turned up and he was just kind of in his own mind, he barely noticed her. And I wonder if one of these time-displaced Tony ends up becoming Kang, and it's not the original quote-unquote Tony, it's just a version of him eventually goes down that timeline to become Kang. There has to be a point to this where it just kind of unravels for him too, and I can imagine that's the timeline that leads to Kang happening. Something will happen to endanger him or the team, probably Wasp finding out about this will somehow do something like that, and hell, maybe him doing this actually weakens the timeline or something since he's editing too much. He's kind of going a little bit further than what the Maker even went, and maybe just doing that kind of destabilizes the timeline even more than it already is. There's a wealth of possibilities and I can't wait for Camp to explore them in the coming issues. The Ultimates issue 13 broke open what the Ultimates are and what they have evolved into during the Ultimates 3.0 endeavor, exploring how this new iteration of the team work and operate. I love the focus on the people of Earth and how they have just as much stake in this fight as heroes do. It's a great way to bring things full circle back to the roots of Marvel Comics, whose many early heroes were just normal people bestowed with great power and responsibility. It's easily one of the most engaging and refreshing books on the shelf right now, and you'd be doing a disservice to yourself not to pick this one up. It's definitely a very refreshing and thoroughly interesting read. I'm going to give this issue a 9.5 out of 10.